Hello, everyone. My name is Fiza Khan, founder and CEO of Silver Regulatory Associates. I'm joined here today with my colleague and dear friend, Trisha Dascom-Smith, who heads up our sustainability, risk, and strategy line here at Silver. Today, we will be discussing the many different regulatory requirements, initiatives, things that perhaps we don't understand, but hopefully Trisha can translate for us, that is going on globally in the EU, the US, and the UK. Trisha, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Fiza.
Of course. So let's just get to it.
Why not?
Let's start with the EU. What's happening?
Oh my gosh. I feel like every day the news is different, but I think there are some staying things that our audience should be aware of, our clients should be aware of. The first is that the Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation, everybody knows this by the acronym SFDR, has been under consultation for quite a long time now. The European Commission announced earlier this year that it was ready to put forth a consultation draft, and that has been continuously delayed. As of a few weeks ago, that was expected to be announced at the end of this year.
Okay.
There is meaningful speculation that we won't know anything until Q1 of 2026. And so much of this, I know, is informed by what's happening with what everybody's probably used to hearing as these omnibus acts, which are intended to try to simplify the other regulatory obligations going on throughout the European Union, particularly what's happening with the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, and the Taxonomy Regulation.
Okay.
Although there was some consensus earlier this year on how to reduce the effort underneath the three of those, there continues to be sort of whispers from EU member states to continue to simplify and further reduce the burden of these regulations. And I think it stands to reason that the European Commission's effort, time, and attention is really spent there. So whatever is going to happen to SFDR, ultimately, I think is just taking a back seat to this.
Okay.
So we should just know that right now we're operating with the current state of SFDR. Managers should continue to work through their efforts and their programs and expect to report in line with current SFDR in 2026. And we'll see what Q1 has for us.
Okay.
Some other things that I think are of interest in the European Union. The EU put out a call for evidence just a few weeks ago, asking for managers that are subject to all of the various environmental reporting requirements in the EU to demonstrate what it is that they'd like to see simplified. And I think
interesting.
Right? I think that this is a huge signal that the next sort of omnibus package we might see out of the European Commission is an effort to potentially reduce, refine, and hopefully ensure no duplicate reporting on environmental efforts by the same types of companies in different member states.
So when they say call to evidence, can you give a little bit more background about what that means?
Sure. So the European Commission is looking for entities that are regulated by these different component regulations to demonstrate to the European Commission why these different regulations are duplicative in nature or why they are overly burdensome. And then the European Commission will ultimately assign a task force to review all this commentary, and they will take this under advisement to determine whether or not there's a reason to reduce the burden of these regulations overall, whether or not there's a reason to simplify. So it's really an opportunity for EU members who are regulated in the EU, who are subject to environmental reporting, to demonstrate back to the Commission what it is they think might be a better step forward or a better road forward for environmental reporting.
And will we, as the general public, see the outcome of those comments that come into the EU?
Yeah, the call for evidence is likely going to go to the expert group, and then the expert group will put out its findings, which will include some of the commentary that in-scope entities ultimately provide. So not dissimilarly to how you might see a comment letter to the Securities and Exchange Commission be public. Potentially not all of the fodder that comes in, but certainly we'll see the trends that have been highlighted to the Commission be available for review.
Fantastic. So can we segue into the UK?
Yeah, absolutely. The United Kingdom, as everybody knows, has not onshored the regulations from the European Union.
Okay.
So when Brexit occurred, it was very clear that the UK was not going to take on the obligations of SFDR. Instead, the UK really decided that it was going to self-identify the regulations by which it wanted its regulated financial firms and other corporate entities to report on all regulations, not just those related to responsibility and sustainability. So the UK has really made a commitment to UK registered entities that it will not create a duplicate reporting burden that they might be subject to just given the proximity to the EU.
Right.
I think everyone can imagine that if you're UK registered, you're probably also with a nexus to the EU. And so I think that's been really nice and it's been well received. The most, I think, sort of notorious regulation, if you will, are the sustainability disclosure requirements or the SDRs that have come out from the United Kingdom. These have, as of late, been noted that they will not apply to portfolio managers, which is a welcome change, but they are, it's an intent to help label for retail investors when a financial product has a sustainable or responsible component to understand what that actually means. Right now, these standards are voluntary for use, and they've really not been widely adopted, and been sort of tremendous amount of confusion about their use. So I think suffice it to say that the UK's got a little bit of runway to understand what the use case for its reporting standards and its regulations might ultimately be. I think of note for our audience and our clients is that the UK has one current consultation that is quite important. The UK as a place had committed to net zero by 2050. And one of the aspects that they're currently consulting on, they being the government, is whether or not they should require transition plans to be written and produced out by financial services participants. And the transition plan is expected to help the UK government understand how a financial services firm is going to help accomplish the UK's goal toward achieving net zero by 2050.
Got it.
Right. So the consultation is asking, again, registered entities and those who advocate on their behalf, whether or not they should be obligated to provide such a transition plan, or whether or not it should be a comply or explain regulation, much what we're similar to here in the States. Silver is a member of a couple of organizations who are going to provide their own commentary to it. Our team is looking forward to providing our thoughts on this. For anybody interested, the comment period does close on September 17th.
Okay.
I think it's a good opportunity that if you are going to be obligated or could be obligated to provide a transition plan, to look through the consultation, to provide your thoughts back to the government on how this might be overly burdensome, what you think might be the right step forward. But it's a really interesting time for the UK, certainly at this moment.
Just one follow-up question
Sure.
regarding the UK. You had mentioned that right now the UK's SDR is voluntary. And is there any reason why our clients, managers would be wanting to, voluntarily provide this information? Is there some sort of nexus between that and the EU's SFDR requirements?
Different, but the same. I think where we're going to see some pressure to ultimately use these will come from government mandate. I really do think that as this effort is evaluated by the UK government, there'll be an opportunity to decide which entities are in scope for required reporting.
Right.
But I think this voluntary time is probably an opportunity for them to understand who is reporting, what is this information yielding, is it decision useful, is it helpful, how can it be leveraged? As it relates to SFDR, the two are not quite the same. I think where there's more overlap is actually between the SDR regulation and then ultimately CSRD, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive.
Interesting.
Under which there are many more acronyms here, ESRSs, European Sustainability Reporting Standards, and the ESRSs and the SDR and then ultimately SDSs that do have some overlap, but there's a lot of work being done by these regulators to try to reduce duplicative reporting.
Okay.
I think that's the takeaway for our clients and for our colleagues.
For sure. Now the US, everyone's thinking, really, what is happening in the US? What do we think about it?
Trisha, the United States is an interesting place, and I think interesting is the right word.
Yeah.
Everyone is very aware of how the federal government has really pulled back from some of these initiatives. As recently as this week, we've seen the EPA come under fire for its ability to regulate greenhouse gas emissions, which is just one thing in a long line of things that have come under fire this year. I think a couple of things that are important to be very aware of. The first is that the federal government, although it has a stance on these topics, has not indicated that having these programs, the integration of environmental social governance risks and opportunities is by any means illegal or shouldn't be done. I think what we're seeing is that this government, this presidency, does not want to see overregulation, does not want to see overly burdensome disclosure. And I think that that's a really important takeaway. I think the other hallmark of 2025 is that unlike 2024, where we saw endless U.S. states putting out bills for anti-ESG or pro-ESG legislation, there's really been sort of a slowdown to that. That's not to say that states don't have a preference or an opinion on this, but it just hasn't been as litigious this year as we've seen in past. Anything could happen. I could be wrong tomorrow, but that's the stance for today.
Okay.
And then I think importantly for our clients and for our friends and colleagues is that the climate-related disclosures that are required out of California are really moving steadily along.
Right.
For those of you who are in scope, you'll know these acronyms, SC261, coming up for compliance on January 1st. We have a thought leadership piece on this, so please feel free to reach out if you'd like to know more about this. SB 253, which requires disclosure of different emissions, Scope 1, Scope 2, and phased-in approach to Scope 3. Still an unknown compliance date as of today, but you do expect it to happen in 2026. Of course, there can be challenges to these. We might see them overturned, but we're moving forward as though they're not, because as of today, they're really standing strong.
Wow. And if you want to learn more about what Trisha and the SRS team at Silver can do for you regarding the U.S. initiatives, as well as those in the EU and the U.K., please feel free to reach out to us. Take a look at our Silver Vision website. We will definitely have the thought leadership posted there. And if you found this educational hub to be useful to you, interesting, in fact, please subscribe and you'll be able to receive even more educational videos from us. Trisha, thank you so much for your insight today.
It's a pleasure, Fissa. Thanks for the conversation.
Of course.